It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
That is
not going to be saved by
You
the
wrote
prince.
it?
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
How did a beloved fairy tale, a rising Hollywood star, and a savage animated parody trigger one of the biggest PR disasters in Disney's modern history? This isn't just a movie controversy. It's a cultural explosion. It's a story about how one of the world's most iconic entertainment companies lost control of its own narrative. About how a breakout star went from fan favorite to internet firestorm.
It was the first animated film that had the kind of Disney magic that had depth, that had absolute, it was riveting, and it's based, of course, on a Brothers Grimm story.
And about how South Park, in just one episode, pushed an already volatile situation straight into pop culture mayhem. At the center of it all, Snow White, a movie that's supposed to represent hope, magic, and timeless love. But instead, it became a symbol of everything fans feared about Hollywood's new direction. And it all started with a remake that no one really asked for. In theory, Disney's 2025 Snow White reboot sounded like a win.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years.
Take a legendary film, Disney's very first feature-length animated movie. Give it a modern spin, add star power with Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, and market it as a bold, updated fairy tale for a new generation. But right from the jump, something felt off. Longtime Disney fans weren't thrilled. For many, the original 1937 classic wasn't just another cartoon. It was the film that built the foundation of Disney's entire legacy. The songs, the characters, the prince, the dwarfs, the nostalgia. Messing with that? Risky. And when Rachel Zegler, a young Latina actress, was announced as the new Snow White, some corners of the internet didn't take it well. Critics pointed to the character's name, Snow White, famously described in the source material as having skin as white as snow, and questioned how such a casting decision would reflect the original story. At first,
now active involves more to do with both South Park Studios and Paramount, and what they recently did toward both Zegler and the Disney company for their Snow White film. It turns out that both Trey Parker and Matt Stone are already preparing for the DEI special that is set to serve as a sequel to the Panderverse.
The backlash seemed manageable, but then Rachel started talking. Rachel Zegler didn't hold back during press interviews. She described the original Snow White as outdated and even creepy. She said the prince was basically a stalker, and that this new version wouldn't be about true love, but about a strong, independent woman becoming a leader. Her comments echoed modern feminist ideals.
Snow White is the first American feature-length animated movie, 1937. It's one of the most beloved movies of all time.
And for some, that was refreshing. But for others, it was like slapping the original in the face. Millions had grown up with this film, and now the star of its reboot was dismissing its themes, questioning its morals, and, in the eyes of many, mocking everything the film stood for. One viral clip showed Rachel laughing as she said, "It's not 1937 anymore." Another showed her shrugging off the prince's importance entirely. The memes came fast. The comment sections lit up, and a divide emerged. On one side, supporters who applauded her honesty.
In addition to that, there was already an uproar about her being cast as Snow White because she is not Caucasian, she is a Latina, she is half Colombian, and so people were like, why were you cast in the first place? We just had a black Little Mermaid, now we're having a Latina Snow White, and she's literally called Snow White, this doesn't make sense.
On the other, fans who thought she was ungrateful, arrogant, and out of touch with what made Disney magical in the first place. Then came the interviews where she doubled down. "I don't dream of true love," she said in one clip. "I dream of being a leader." While empowering to some, others saw it as the final straw. The backlash was now in full swing, and South Park was watching. South Park has never been shy about mocking celebrities.
Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed, because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
No one's safe. And when the Snow White controversy exploded online, it was only a matter of time before Trey Parker and Matt Stone joined the chaos. The result? A savage parody that aired in their DEI special, following up on their earlier Panderverse episode. In it, a cartoon version of Rachel Zegler was portrayed as a hyper-woke diva, lecturing everyone, rewriting the story to reflect her personal beliefs, and berating fictional Disney execs who couldn't keep up with her demands. The satire was brutal. But the worst part? It was eerily close to reality. The exaggerated dialogue matched real things Rachel had said. Clips were edited side by side with her interviews, and fans couldn't believe the overlap. It didn't feel like parody, it felt like exposure. Within hours, the episode went viral. Twitter, now X, exploded. TikTokers posted reaction videos. Memes flooded Reddit.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely, when it got announced,
Snow White! He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
That was like trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
And suddenly, Rachel Zegler was no longer the face of a movie. She was the punchline of a cultural joke. And behind the scenes, she was livid. According to insiders, Rachel Zegler was blindsided by the parody. She didn't expect South Park to come for her so directly, and definitely not with such surgical accuracy. Sources close to her said she was humiliated, furious, and deeply hurt.
On the original production, I was scared of it. Oh, it was so weird. It was a stalker. Like, I feel like if you are taking on the most iconic Disney role ever, genuinely, like this was the most prolific Disney film, I feel like you should kind of have some sort of reverence for the original production.
But while Rachel stewed privately, Disney said nothing. In fact, the studio did the opposite of support her. They quietly began pulling her from the spotlight. Scheduled interviews? Cancelled. Talk show appearances? Nixed. Magazine profiles? Ghosted. The official reason was always scheduling conflicts.
It was supposed to come out like a year and a half ago, and then we went after them so hard because of their variety of ridiculous sins that they actually went into full-scale reshoots on Snow White when we announced that we had a competitor.
But insiders claimed it was part of a bigger strategy, to keep Rachel away from microphones at all costs. Why? Because they feared she'd say something else that would trigger another PR nightmare. Rachel, reportedly, was not happy. She felt thrown under the bus. And just like that, a promising star and her studio were now in full-blown damage control mode, on opposite sides.
Exactly what they're doing, and that is why we hate the diversity, equity, and inclusion casting and writing in movies.
Disney wasn't just dealing with a fussy actress or a mean cartoon episode. They were dealing with a full-blown public meltdown. Behind closed doors, Bob Iger, freshly reinstated as CEO, was reportedly holding emergency meetings. Department heads debated whether to support Rachel or let the controversy die. Legal teams monitored online reactions in real time. Marketing execs scrambled to reframe the narrative. At one point, entire scenes were rumored to be rewritten. Some insiders claimed the film's third act was being reshot entirely. The cast and crew were walking on eggshells. No one wanted to make the next mistake.
And this started with the movie star Rachel Zegler, who I believe would be categorized as a loudmouth dope.
And while all of this was happening, Rachel wasn't even promoting the film. The face of the reboot was missing, and fans noticed. As if the situation wasn't chaotic enough, another bombshell hit. Rumors began circulating that Rachel and co-star Gal Gadot, cast as the evil queen, weren't even speaking. Allegedly, the two clashed over creative differences. Some reports claimed Rachel was frustrated that Gal's performance was stealing attention. The tension reportedly spilled into public events. At one red carpet appearance, they barely acknowledged each other. At another, they were seen avoiding eye contact altogether.
As an actor, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to dictate if a film actually happens. You don't get to dictate when it is shot, how it is shot, if you can ever speak about it to the public. You are simply just there to show up and say your lines and look the way they want you to look.
Whispers spread that Rachel had complained about Gal improvising dialogue during filming, which allegedly led to several scenes being cut or re-edited. The entire production now looked like a slow-motion car crash. And South Park's parody? It hit this beat too, showing the Snow White character lashing out at her evil queen co-star for stealing her spotlight. Was it satire? Or just too accurate? Rachel stayed off the press circuit, but she didn't stay silent. Cryptic tweets began appearing on her timeline. vague references to unfair portrayals, misunderstandings, and feeling silenced.
God forbid a woman dream about true love. We're all just sitting around here, maybe I could be president one day. I hate men, I just want to be president. That screams Disney princess. Oh my God, I'm literally getting enraged. Once again, I feel like I'm back in 2022.
Fans picked them apart like tea leaves. Some sympathized, calling her a victim of internet pile-on. Others saw the posts as proof that she hadn't learned anything, that she was doubling down instead of reflecting. And then came the legal whispers. Insiders claimed Rachel's team was considering legal action, possibly against Disney, for limiting her promotional rights, which may have violated parts of her contract. Others speculated about a PR negotiation tactic to force Disney's hand. Whatever the case, things were officially hostile. The actress and the studio were no longer aligned.
Yeah, the entire film's about a love story. It's about a love story because that's what the point of the film is. And I'm sorry that chivalry and a man pursuing you is now deemed as stalking, which now it's kind of making sense why men are opting out of the dating scene.
And the public knew it. Meanwhile, South Park's episode was still circulating. It had become a cultural moment. And Rachel Zegler was still trending, for all the wrong reasons. For Disney, this wasn't just about one movie. This was about their brand. The Snow White remake was supposed to be a safe bet, a guaranteed hit, a nostalgic slam dunk. But instead, it became a symbol of everything fans feared about modern Hollywood. Too much messaging, not enough magic. Even loyal Disney fans began to waver. Parents didn't know what kind of tone the movie would take. Gen Z audiences mocked the drama, and industry watchers called it a PR disaster with no center. Internally, Disney was said to be reconsidering its approach to legacy reboots entirely. Bob Iger even hinted in a shareholder meeting that they may scale back on politically charged themes moving forward. But for Snow White, that shift might have come too late.
One major development going on now involves more to do with Rachel Zegler and her attitude towards South Park Studios and Paramount after learning about what they are planning for their upcoming special called the DEI Special.
The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway, and that's when I started to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced. And finally, I want to scream, and I'm like, why are they replacing every single character with someone who is diverse?
So here we are, a beloved fairy tale, a rising star, a controversial remake, and a comedy show that ripped it all apart in 22 minutes. The Snow White 2025 meltdown isn't just about bad press or one upset actress. It's about how fast a studio can lose control of its narrative, how a few interviews can become a lightning rod for internet outrage, and how a cartoon parody can lock a story into the cultural memory forever. Rachel Zegler may go on to do bigger, better things. Disney may still salvage the movie, but the internet doesn't forget. The memes, the backlash, the silence, the feud, the South Park episode. They're all part of a cautionary tale Hollywood will be studying for years. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a modernized Snow White. This was about what happens when fairy tales, egos, and internet culture collide. As the controversy grew, one thing became crystal clear: the fan base was fractured. On one side were traditionalists, Disney purists who viewed the original Snow White as untouchable. For them, this remake represented everything wrong with Hollywood's modernization obsession. They weren't against updates per se, but rewriting the core of a beloved classic.
Our rights are on the line, folks.
Bitch! The right to buy Cosby sweaters?
Come on.
That's the face of a serial killer.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button.
Especially one with such historic significance, felt sacrilegious. On the other side were progressive fans, who saw Rachel's interpretation as necessary. They applauded her candid remarks and welcomed a Snow White who didn't rely on a prince. To them, Rachel wasn't a villain, she was pushing Disney forward. But between these two camps was a larger, more chaotic group. The memeists, the trolls, the casuals. The internet's middle class. They didn't care about cinematic integrity or feminist commentary. They were here for the spectacle, and South Park had just given them gold. The divide wasn't just political or cultural, it was personal. People projected their own values onto the story, and suddenly, Snow White wasn't a fairy tale anymore. It was a litmus test. While mainstream media tried to play it safe, YouTubers and TikTok creators were already knee-deep in the drama. Dozens of long-form breakdowns hit YouTube within days of the South Park episode. Channels that specialize in media analysis, Hollywood drama, and woke versus traditional commentary all found a new target: Rachel Zegler and Disney's Snow White reboot. Some creators criticized Rachel's tone, calling her condescending and out of her depth. Others analyzed her body language in interviews, claiming she seemed dismissive and smug. A few even compiled montages of her most controversial quotes set to dramatic music, turning real moments into meme-worthy hits. TikTok wasn't far behind. Short-form edits of Rachel's interviews were stitched with South Park clips, often exaggerating her meltdown for comedic effect. One viral clip showed cartoon Rachel screaming over a prince's existence, then cut to the real Rachel saying, "I don't need to be saved." These platforms didn't just amplify the drama, they shaped it. They became the lens through which millions interpreted the situation. And that's where things got dangerous. Behind the scenes, Disney wasn't just battling a PR issue, they were facing a full-blown identity crisis. In recent years, Disney had leaned hard into inclusivity and messaging-driven storytelling. Some praised the direction as progressive and long overdue. Others accused the company of abandoning heartwarming storytelling for checklists and corporate activism. The Snow White backlash became symbolic of this tension. Insiders described heated debates inside Disney HQ. Should the studio double down on its progressive messaging? Or scale it back to avoid alienating nostalgic fans? Bob Iger, who returned as CEO to steady the ship, was said to be torn. He reportedly wanted to defend Rachel publicly but feared it would make things worse. Every move was a risk. Every silence was a statement. Executives worried that any attempt to address South Park would lead to more mockery. Historically, people targeted by the show only made things worse by responding. So Disney did nothing, and the silence spoke volumes. To understand why this all hit so hard, you have to go back to the original. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs wasn't just a movie. It was the movie. The first full-length animated feature in American history. The film that built the Disney empire. Released in 1937, it was revolutionary, visually stunning, emotionally gripping, and technologically groundbreaking. Walt Disney risked everything on its success. Critics called it Disney's folly before release, until it became a global phenomenon. It won awards. It made history. It became a cornerstone of animation itself. To some, rewriting that legacy felt like rewriting Walt Disney's legacy. Not updating a story, but erasing a triumph. So when Rachel mocked the original plot and dismissed its themes, it wasn't just commentary. It was heresy. That's why the backlash was so passionate. This wasn't just a film. It was a cultural heirloom. Before all this, Rachel Zegler was on a fast track to stardom. She had stunned audiences in Spielberg's West Side Story, held her own alongside veteran actors, and earned praise for her charisma and vocal talent. Casting her as Snow White seemed like the next logical step. But after the South Park episode and the online meltdown, her image changed. Now, casting directors and producers were watching closely, not just her acting, but how she handled pressure. Some insiders speculated that studios might hesitate to attach her to major projects in the short term. Too much baggage. Too much noise. Others argued the opposite, that Hollywood would rally around her, framing her as a victim of toxic fandom and misogynistic criticism. Either way, her next move would be critical. Was she a misunderstood trailblazer? Or a cautionary tale about overplaying your hand? The answer might depend on how Snow White 2025 performs at the box office. One of the strangest aspects of the entire fiasco was Rachel's disappearing act. After the controversy peaked, Disney began quietly canceling her scheduled appearances. Talk shows, magazine spreads, even a planned Saturday Night Live performance was allegedly scrapped last minute. Some cancellations were attributed to scheduling conflicts, others to strategic recalibrations. But nobody bought it. Insiders said Disney feared another viral quote. Rachel had become unpredictable, too big of a risk for live interviews. The studio wanted to keep her under wraps, let the storm pass, then reintroduce her once the fire died down. But instead of calming the situation, the silence made it worse. Fans noticed. Journalists asked questions. And the speculation grew even louder. Was Rachel being silenced? Was Disney ashamed of her? Or was the star being protected from herself? No one had answers. Just theories. And the internet thrives on theories. While Rachel took the spotlight, both good and bad, Gal Gadot stayed noticeably quiet. The Wonder Woman star had been cast as the evil queen, a move that thrilled many fans. Her star power brought credibility to the remake. Her performance was anticipated to be one of the highlights. But then the feud rumors started. Whispers of tension on set. Award show coldness. Alleged creative clashes. And worst of all, reports that Gal's improvised lines were cut due to Rachel's complaints. While nothing was confirmed, the public noticed their lack of chemistry. At events, they stood apart. Interviews were separate. And fans drew their own conclusions. Some even blamed Disney, saying the studio was so focused on avoiding controversy that they were stifling the film's natural chemistry. Gal, for her part, said nothing. And sometimes, silence says everything. Let's talk about South Park. Their role in this story can't be overstated. Yes, the controversy existed before. Yes, Rachel had already said controversial things. But South Park took it all and distilled it into a viral cultural moment. Their parody was ruthless, but effective. It didn't just mock Rachel. It mocked Disney's entire strategy. The XX. The marketing machine. The attempt to modernize classics without understanding what made them work in the first place. And because the episode aired at exactly the right time, when emotions were high and the internet was watching, it took over the narrative. 4 weeks, the parody clips were more popular than the actual promotional material for the film. Think about that, a cartoon mocking Snow White became more culturally relevant than the film itself. That's the South Park effect. So here's the big question. Is there any way to save Snow White 2025? In Hollywood, nothing is certain. We've seen controversial films win audiences back with strong performances, good storytelling, or sheer curiosity. And there are still fans who want to see what Rachel and Gal bring to the roles. But the hill is steep. With cancelled promotions, internal chaos, and viral ridicule hanging over the film, even a great movie might not be enough. There are whispers that Disney is considering delaying the release again. Others say they might push it out quietly, hoping controversy fatigue will reduce the backlash. Some suggest doubling down, leaning into the drama and letting the spectacle sell the film. But at this point, no strategy feels like a sure thing. The Snow White fiasco isn't just about one movie. It's about a bigger trend in Hollywood, the reboot trap. Studios love familiar IPs. They are safe. They sell. But updating them for modern audiences while respecting the original? That's the real challenge. With Snow White, Disney may have leaned too far in one direction, rewriting not just the character, but the spirit of the story. And in doing so, they alienated both the old fans who cherished it and the new ones who just wanted a good film. Hollywood is now watching closely. Other remakes in development, Hercules, Lilo and Stitch, even The Princess and the Frog, may face similar scrutiny. The lesson? Don't just modernize for the sake of it. Understand the soul of the original, or risk losing everything. What started as a simple reboot turned into a media circus. An actress trying to share her perspective. A studio trying to navigate modern values. A cartoon that captured the internet's attention. And a fan base that couldn't agree on what Disney should be. Rachel Zegler may still have a bright future. Disney may find a way to turn things around. But the damage is done. The Snow White meltdown will be remembered not just as a failed campaign, but as a turning point. For Hollywood. For Disney. And for how we view the reimagining of the stories we once thought untouchable.